How do you even introduce our episode 52 guest? You don't. When it's legend Doc Emerick, you let him introduce himself. We'll learn some new verbs with Doc, plus Kaprizov skates in St. Paul, and we'll play a game of Is It Nick or Nico? Two forwards confusing us with their uncanny resemblance as the Minnesota Wild get back on the ice at TRIA.
Hunters, fishermen, and Minnesota sports fans, new and old, locally owned and operated SodaStick offers the widest variety of gear and garb to dress you and your fandoms. Toss it back old school with Remember the Metrodome tee, or look sharp with any of their latest McGolden Light collaboration collection. Add that Bardown Beauties promo code at checkout for free shipping on all purchases. Hello, everybody. We're back. Episode 52. What's going on? For all those that are watching on YouTube, I'd like to draw attention to Alexis and I's very festive, Christmassy color. And then, Fred, you're rounding it out with a nice black.
Everybody needs a little shade of black. Everyone.
Yeah, and Alexis has a nice green. I'm digging it. I'm really feeling this Christmas vibe.
Yeah, unplanned. Yeah, we're in the spirit of Christmas. We were ready to go, and here we are. So Fred's not wearing teal. He's normally wearing some crazy shade of blue, and
some crazy shade, meaning our Bardown Beauties hoodie.
Yes. Let's start there before we get into any real news. Again, another shout out to Landon and SodaStick. As you guys saw, the jerseys officially dropped this week. They are sick, and we love all the support. Everybody that's been super into them. Landon always does a phenomenal job with his designs, but I think these jerseys are just off the chain filthy. I feel that drip. That's what all the kids are saying, right? That's cool.
I've had so many people text me personally as well and just be like, those are so cool. I'm going to get one, or I love those. You guys killed it. And I think some people think we designed them. So every time someone compliments them, I'm like, no, that was SodaStick. They did an amazing job. We just put them on and then took pictures of them. That's
we said yes. Yes, we'll take these. These are great.
Please make those.
So shout out to them. Yeah, certainly be sure to pick those up. They make a great Christmas gift. They won't be arriving until after Christmas, so do keep that in mind. But they've got other t-shirts, and then we'll actually have another line release coming up in the new year. So stay tuned for that. Little tease on that. But we got hockey news. Lots to talk about, lots of changes, lots of not great stuff, lots of really great stuff. Alexis, you want to start with the good, the bad, the ugly? What do you want to do?
Let's get the ugly out of the way so that we can truly savor and enjoy the good. That's the way to do it, right?
I like it. I think that's the best approach. Obviously we can't move into this episode without touching on the Bill Garen allegations. If I'm sure most of you had saw, there was a sexual harassment lawsuit against the Pittsburgh Penguins and their AHL affiliate in Wilkes-Barre. That happened during the time that Bill Garen was the assistant general manager in Pittsburgh. And so he was overseeing this AHL team. One of the assistant coaches and his wife are accusing the then head coach of Wilkes-Barre of sexually harassing her during an event. They came forward, told Bill, and Bill had promptly fired him a couple days later, this head coach rather. However, Bill also said to kind of keep things quiet and, to keep this internal, which doesn't look great, right? A sexual harassment is sexual harassment, and it's not okay. So to tell people to stay quiet about it, that's where it gets kind of like a muddy water. Again, he did his due diligence in removing the coach from his position and trying to rectify that wrong. But there's a little bit of, not great. It doesn't shine well on Bill and on the organization. They haven't released an official statement through the team, but Dave Schwartz of Care 11 did receive the following statement from the Minnesota Wild that said, "The Minnesota Wild has discussed this matter with Bill Garen and fully supports him. As this is a matter of active litigation, we will have no further comment." They also released a Bill Garen statement, which said, "When I learned of these allegations, I promptly brought them to the Pittsburgh Penguins senior management. The allegations were quickly investigated. I emphatically deny anything to the contrary." So those are, again, statements that were issued directly to Dave Schwartz and Care 11. Nothing has come from the Wild directly to the rest of the media. And frankly, it's kind of been dropped. But Alexis, what's your vibe about it? This happened early on in the week, and now we're on Friday recording, and it seems to have gone away, which unfortunately happens so often in cases like this.
Yeah, well, was it Monday, Tuesday, whatever day it was that it came out kind of right away in the morning, and we were all texting about it in our Bardown Beauties group message, just kind of saying oh boy, this is not good. And I kind of expected more things to happen throughout the day or even later in the week, to see more comments, to see more things being said about it, and nothing else really came of it. So I was having a hard time even forming a thought on how I felt about it. Obviously my initial reaction is whatever is true about this, if this entire thing is true, this doesn't look good. But I wanted more information just to kind of see what went down and how it went down. And we didn't really get that. So, I mean, we'll keep our eyes peeled to see if anything else is released in the meantime. Obviously, I think it's expected that Bill Garen would deny that, especially because it's something that happened, however long ago. So I don't know. We'll see if anything else comes out, but that's all that we have for information right now.
Yeah, I mean, nothing more has come of it. And again, it's active, and it's kind of unfortunately turns into a he said, she said, right? The coach can say, this is what I saw, and then Bill is going to deny it and say
unless
whatever,
there's any physical proof that can come out to support it, which we haven't seen any yet, that at least I haven't seen any yet come out. So
correct. So we'll keep an eye on that naturally. Again, unfortunate to see. It's unfortunate because it does kind of dirty the name of Bill Garen a little bit, just because he's involved directly or indirectly. He was there. He was the guy in charge, and you want those people to take some accountability too, especially when that's so important as GM of a new team. So stay tuned for more information on that. That's all we're going to talk about it for right now. Another kind of not sad but bittersweet story came out this week. Michael Russo did an absolutely incredible job sharing Mark Parrish's struggle with alcoholism, which he opened up about. I mean, it was heartbreaking to see, but also kind of so powerful, right? Because you know what courage it takes to talk about such a personal struggle and be so open. And I think Mark Parrish, and shout out to Ben Clymer and Brian Lawton, his buddies who helped him get the help he needed. Shout out to his wife, Nicole, who also assisted him. We know Parrish. He's a beaut. We've known him through the years. He's such a wonderful guy. And to know that, this disease affects everybody, right? And you might not have any idea, and you might not know how deeply that goes, but definitely Mike Russo, no better writer to tell such a story in such a tremendous way. So we're with you, Mark. We are proud of you, and we certainly are with you on this battle as you continue to fight it, because it never ends.
Yeah, no, and I thought that was something that Russo did a good job of in the story, of kind of highlighting that this isn't, the end of the story. This is still something that he is dealing with every day, that his family is dealing with. And it took me a couple hours to actually read the story, because I knew it was going to be a hard read. And so when I saw it come out, I was like, okay, I'm going to set aside some time in the afternoon to sit down and read this. And it brought me to tears. I mean, Russo did a fantastic job writing that story. And something that I loved about the way the story was told, that Parrish's humor was still captured so perfectly in that story. Like, anybody who knows Mark Parrish knows that he's got a great sense of humor, easy guy to talk to, just a fun person to be around. And as hard as that story was to tell and to write, his personality was captured so perfectly, even in the hardest parts of that story to read through. So yeah, tremendous job to Russo. Like you said, really no one better to write that story, and seeing everybody in Minnesota kind of come together and say, like, everything I saw was like, we've got your back. Like, we're all in this together. Like, we support you. You will get through this. And I think that just speaks to the hockey community and just the community in general here in Minnesota about, seeing someone that we care about or that we know go through something like that and rallying together. And so it was a really sad, really hard story to read, but I'm really proud of him for doing what he did to get through this and get to the point he's at, and being brave enough to share his story, because that is a tremendously difficult thing to do for what he was going through. So
heck yeah, and continue that fight. It'll be a fight and struggle every day. I think my favorite part you had mentioned, I mean, when he had talked about, he keeps seeing it as a milestone, but then he has to remind himself it's something he lives with. He doesn't get a silver stick after he reaches 1,000 days. He has to continue to fight against that battle, which is hard. Our society loves to have a drink. I'm one of them, right? Like, oh yeah, I'll have a couple drinks, especially in hockey. That's kind of part of that community there. Hockey guys love to have a beer or two, so kudos to him. And again, all of his family and friends that rallied around him. It was very cool, and a good kind of, again, a sad, but a very uplifting story. So give it a read if you haven't on The Athletic. Not as sad news, but kind of sad. Zuccarello out for the season. Let's just drop it. Matt Zuccarello, Minnesota Wild center, who I think, truthfully, Dean Evison was looking at heading into the season as having a very large role and really carrying a lot of weight. And he is injured. He is out. He is having surgery. He will not be playing. Alexis, what was your initial reaction? I mean, personally, I was kind of like, okay.
Well, it's funny because, I mean, it's not, the situation isn't funny, but like I was sitting with my dad, like, I think the day that was announced that he was having surgery or whatever. And my dad goes, so Zuccarello's having surgery? And I'm like, yeah, allegedly. And he goes, the season isn't even happening. He's like, how did he get hurt? And I'm like, I think it's some kind of lingering thing. I was like, I don't know. It was kind of a weird like story, like not something you expected to see at this point in time. But yeah, I think that they're expecting him to play a big role. And quite frankly, he didn't play the role that that he was expected to play when he first came on this team, and he was unnoticeable in the playoffs. And I think that there was a lot of disappointment surrounding his play here in Minnesota, and just kind of not seeing him shine in the way people expected. So hopefully, the surgery goes well, and hopefully he can get back to a point where he's feeling healthy and feeling comfortable so that he can play the role that he's been expected to play, because you need all guys firing on all cylinders to make a successful team. And especially when guys who are expected to do something aren't doing their job, it becomes very noticeable. So
especially when you're the Minnesota Wild and you need all the help that you can get.
Yes. Sorry, and when fans are extremely critical and notice everything. Yeah. Not a great spot to not stand out.
I saw a little bit of the Twitter commentary around this, and I want to ask you, Alexis, because we've talked about it. Do you see this as a potential opening for a 1-year contract for the return of Mikhail Grandlund?
Everybody was making fun of me when I said it, but now it might happen. Yeah, let's throw it back to the to unrestricted free agency time. And I was joking kind of, but I do like Grandlund, and I don't know, he's still out there. I think it's a possibility, and there's something about bringing players back to teams that they had already played for that just makes me feel warm inside. I'm like, oh, that's so nice. We're bringing him back. So
such a Minnesota thing. It's just
it really
you're one of us. You love us.
No
we
logic
love you.
behind it. I'm just please come home. Yeah. So I don't know. There's something to be said about that. And I think maybe the longer he's out there, if there's not other teams showing interest, the Wild maybe fill that hole. We'll see. I think I've thought it's been a possibility, even on a small level, since unrestricted free agency. I'm like, why not? Sure.
I mean, for me, I'm still surprised that he's available because it's not, he struggled a little bit in Nashville, but you got to give the kid a benefit of the doubt. He's with a new team. He had to learn 2 different systems under 2 different coaches. That was the Wild were the only organization he'd ever been with. And so for him to go to a totally new squad, it's different. And I think he had such high projections for him in Nashville, right? Everybody here in Minnesota was like, oh God, Grandlund's going, oh, can you imagine him setting up Johansson down low? You saw the writing on the wall for Grandlund to succeed, and he didn't meet those expectations. But as much as I like him as a player, as a person, I didn't like the idea of bringing him back initially. Yeah. With this injury, and if you want to do a 1-year small deal, I like that a little bit better. And then you can always look at extending him. If it does work out, then great. Sure, if it doesn't, toss him. You just use him for the year, and that's fine. Because I don't right now know who fills in on that top 6 then. I don't, that's the big question.
Well, and I think that you could get him for a reasonable price. I'm kind of surprised at how good of a price you could get him for. Like you said, even for just a 1-year deal, I think that is something that the Wild could probably afford. Yeah. And Grandlund, he is a very talented hockey player. And like you said, a lot of people expected him to blow up in Nashville and have a tremendous career there. And I think there's something about Grandlund that makes him kind of like a niche player in the sense that he needs time to adjust. He has a very specific style of play that I don't think is easy for him to just have anywhere. He kind of needs time to adjust to his surroundings. And so I think maybe that was part of the issue. And like you said, he had only ever played in Minnesota. So it takes time to learn a new system. So I think that if you brought him back, I think he would kind of, even though the Minnesota Wild are a much different team than they were when he left Minnesota, I think he would find him kind of slipping back into his routine here in Minnesota. And, like you said, you can always extend it. If you sign him for 1 year and all of a sudden he's got a 30-goal season, we'll sign him up for 3 more years. Shoot, who cares? I think
it's a short-term deal like Bukestad is, right? It can't hurt you really that much. So I'm curious to see. It's something that I don't hate, like I said, as much as I would just a willy-nilly bring him back because we love him signing. This is one that could actually help the team and possibly fuel them. Speaking of Nick Bukestad.
I was like, I knew that was going to be a segue.
Segue.
I knew it.
I pride myself on my segues and my guest introductions. Reminder, Doc Emerick coming up soon. Yep, got you that. No, I have to admit, so the Minnesota Wild tweeted out, players are now back skating at TRIA, which is very exciting. It means that training camp is probably coming. Kaprizov on the ice at TRIA for the first time. If you guys
beautiful.
Follow the Minnesota Wild, you saw glimpses of that. Looked sick as predicted. But so the Minnesota Wild had tweeted out 4 different photos of players. And mind you, I haven't really done anything with the Wild or hockey related since September maybe, when they made some additional signings or whenever free agency opened. Anyway, I was like, oh, look it's Jules Eriksson Ek. Oh, look it's Carson Soucy. Oh, look it's Kaprizov. Oh, and it's Nico Sturm. Because this photo looked like a Nico Sturm. And then our friend Aaron Laufrey, who runs the Minnesota Wild social media, who does a phenomenal job, actually tweeted at me. And she's like, that's Nick Bukestad. And I was like, what? And then I was like, I forgot Nick Bukestad was on the team for a hot minute. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that is Nick Bukestad. And then yesterday, on Thursday, they tweeted out a picture of the two side by side. And my goodness, identical. Like if they weren't a lefty and a righty respectively, you would have no idea. It's the same person. If you do a shot
from like the shoulders up, like guarantee you could not tell them apart. And it's funny because I saw your exchange with Aaron, I saw your tweet and stuff, and I was kind of like laughing to myself. I'm like, Jesse, rookie mistake. Come on, man. Like I know we're feeling a little rusty, but like, no. And then I like saw the picture of them. And granted, even in that picture, I'm like, yeah, they do look alike. And then when I saw the side by side picture of them, I was like, what the hell? Like they literally look like twins.
The feature, like it's the nose and it's kind of the eyes and they're even similar height and they're blonde. And it's funny because then I started, because I was showing my husband, I'm like, no, you got to look at this, because naturally he loves to make fun of me. He's like, you think you know it all and you don't. I'm like, I know everything. So first of all, check yourself. No. And so I showed him, and like even pictures of Nico off the ice, I'm like, oh my God, that does look like Nick
they're
Bukestad.
Literally like kind of like taller, lankier guys. Like they have a similar body type, like same hair color, facial structure is the same. And like I said, you put them in the Wild practice jerseys with the helmet on and put them side by side from the shoulders up. Good luck. I guarantee.
And you got number 7, number 27. Like, come on. Yeah. But no. So I thought that's very funny. Twins, just classic. That's one more thing to screw me up this year, as we realize. Which, speaking of this year, another segue.
Wow. She's killing it today.
The NHL, yeah, right. The NHL
killing it's one word for it.
You like it. When the NHL finally came out and said January 1st is obviously not happening, not going to be.
We then knew that.
Date. Yeah. Yes. But they, released a more promising idea of January 13th will be the official new start date, which makes a lot of sense. You can still get training camp. Like I said, TRIA has been open for a bit for the players, but you're seeing more and more guys coming together and actually making those skates a little bit more official. So that's very promising. So January 13th is the start date. Now we get into the division realignments, right?
Oh, the stress.
And so at first, Pierre LeBrun, a wonderful, wonderful reporter who is so respected,
reliable,
knows everything, very reliable, tweets out that the Minnesota Wild had now moved into a new Central Division, and St. Louis gets bumped over into what is a West Pacific type of hybrid, right? So it was like, yay, Wild fans kind of get what they want. And the joke was like, oh, did the Wild just whine enough to get what they want? Which probably they did. Whatever.
Well, I thought I saw that they were saying like the Wild basically like put up a fight saying like, we don't want to play all those late games. Like, please move us. So I'm sure that had something to do with it. So then everyone was like, all right, thank God we're back in a normal spot at a normal
6:00 start times. Like this is a dream. I mean, it's a tougher conference, but whatever.
Guess who drops the bomb? Go ahead and hit it, Jesse.
Last night at 9:30, after I got done talking to a varsity hockey team, I checked Twitter and I was all like, yay, life is good. And then Russo's like, nope, it's not. The Minnesota Wild will probably be playing in the West Pacific hybrid and 9:00 start times and all of that. And it was like, the one thing, and I even tweeted this at Russo, because Russo and then another Minnesota Wild podcast, and I forget who it was. I apologize. I'm not trying to slight them. I just forgot. They had both already recorded their episodes, so they didn't get to talk about this new. And I was like, yes, the Beauties finally are on top of something. We got that going for us. Never happens to us. So, I mean, Alexis, what are your thoughts? Obviously, anger. There's the one shining light is it's a much easier division. The Wild will have a higher probability of success against some of those teams, I think. Not to like
Jesse, don't try to sweet talk me. You know how I feel about this.
Lay it on me.
My emotions are being played with. I don't know how to feel. We had all the hype. Wild are back with torts. Life is good. The dream team in Alexis's head is reunited. And then before I can just fully enjoy that moment, it gets taken away from me and the Wild get put back in the Pacific. But yes, I will agree with you. That will be a much easier division to play in, and a lot of people were saying that. They were like, there is some teams in here who are just going to absolutely dominate the rest of this division, and for a season where the Wild probably aren't going to be the best team in the league, right? Like they might have a good season, but there's so many questions just because the team has changed so much in the off season and whatnot. It might be good for them to be in a division where there's more winnable games. So we'll see. if I could have Torts in our division or more winnable games, selfishly, I would choose to have Torts in our division because he is like the bright spot in my life.
I'm curious how Wild fans feel about that, guys. What do you think? Would you rather win games, or do you want to make Alexis and Torts happy? Like, what would you prefer?
People showing up at my door
games.
with a pitchfork. Yeah, they're gonna be like, kick her off the podcast. We don't like her opinion. That's fine. I can take the heat. I love John Tortorella. It's fine. But yeah, it's good and bad. We'll see. The late start times are gonna be kind of tough. Just after a while, having those games every now and then is fine. And I'm a night owl. I kind of like the chaos of the late games. But after a while, I feel like it's going to be like, oh, another 9 o'clock start. Can't wait to go to bed at 12:30 in the morning. That'll be fun. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Nothing's official yet, though. Let's just keep that in mind. They've been
I was just going to say,
right.
these are all sources. And again, things are probably going to change. You're going to have probably 10 new conference alignments before we even ever get there.
Watch. We thought we were breaking news, and I guarantee you in like 2 hours, they're going to announce like the official divisions. And
just kidding.
Like, well,
the Wild are in the East. They're going to play. They're going to Canada. Actually, yeah, they cut Minnesota and we're like, you guys count. We'll finally move you up to your dream. I do have to say it was funny. I think the Flyers had tweeted this out. ESPN, which God bless them, just never quite get hockey right. Even though they have some really phenomenal hockey writers on their roster, the TV side of things just doesn't seem to get it. And they tweeted out this alignment completely omitting the Philadelphia Flyers. And so they just never included the Flyers. Were like, cool, the worldwide leading sports network, nothing for the Philadelphia Flyers. So I was like, oh, poor Philly.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. So yeah, stay tuned. We'll see what happens. I mean, obviously, no matter what happens, we'll be there doing what we can, and hopefully things get a little bit closer to solidifying. There was also a rumor / tweet yesterday that kind of felt was irresponsible. It was a little premature.
Yeah, it was
about the NHL purchasing COVID vaccines.
Yeah,
for everybody that'll be involved in the return. And the way the tweet was phrased, it just kind of made it seem like they're just going to go ahead because they're the rich people and can do whatever they want. And I don't think that was the intent. I think, and then a tweet was later issued many hours later saying, no, whoops. I mean, the NHL is going to do this appropriately and whatnot. So again, that's another issue where there's not a lot out there about it.
Yeah.
But I figured we should mention it. Like that is a rumor. And I'm sure they would. I mean, just like they purchased all the testing kits when they did the bubble.
Right.
Sure, if they are able to do something to help keep the season moving forward and prevent things and keep their players healthy, then they're going to do it. But I don't know that they're necessarily trying to bogart stuff.
NHL Twitter had a full-on meltdown yesterday in the span of those couple hours that the first tweet was released and the second tweet was released. And yeah, to be fair, that first tweet was kind of concerning because it sounded almost all but official, and everyone was kind of like, is this really happening? Like, we want more details, like what's going on? And then the second tweet comes out a little while later. It's like, well, it's not official. They're just thinking about it, yada, yada, yada. And I think people's biggest gripe with it was saying like, well, what about everyone else who needs a vaccine? Like, are they really going to give it to athletes and like not all these other people? And granted, we don't know any information about this other than like those tweets and that's it. But I would have a hard time believing that athletes would get a vaccine before other people who need it more, like healthcare workers or whatever. So if that is the case, I would have to assume that everyone else who needs it more than athletes are going to get it first. And then the athletes will also get it.
Yeah. I mean, part of me has a hard time believing it. Then part of me is like, it's America. No, they probably will get something ahead of us.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean,
sports, but
keep in mind, whatever it is they're doing it to try to keep these players safe. Like they're doing it out of, they're trying to do a good thing. It's not meant to be malicious. It's not meant to hurt other people or whatever. And I think a lot of people kind of took it that way right off the bat. So we'll keep an eye on it. Again, see as more information comes out, what the details of this look like. But yeah, obviously we want the players safe. We want the staff safe and all of that to have the best season that we can. So we'll see what it looks like. But yeah, I'm sure we'll see more information come out in the next couple weeks here.
Yep, as the season continues to truck forward. That's going to do it for our first segment. We actually are going to move our up for debate portion of this to segment 3, so be sure to stay tuned in that. But first, before that, we've got Doc Emrick. Yes, I said it. Doc Emrick. That is not nearly a cool enough voice to introduce Doc, so I can't wait for him to kind of help introduce himself. But stay tuned for that, I guess. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
We've given our Teespring store a fresh new look, custom designed to rep and support the Beauts. We've got hockey hoodies and tees perfect for lounging and rewatching your favorite Wild game. Grab a mask, grab a tee, and be a Beaut with our official Bardown Beauties Teespring store.
All right, guys, I don't even know if it's appropriate to use my own voice or attempt at adjectives to introduce our next guest, who is an absolute American treasure. He's also recently authored and released a book of his own life. Off the mic, it is my greatest honor to introduce Mr. Doc Emerick. Doc, how are you?
I'm good. It's great to be on with the two of you. And I see a little holly. Was that a holly decoration? I see a Merry Christmas behind one of you.
Oh, yep.
I see red and green behind the other.
Uh-huh.
And I know enough about, and you have a green sweater on, and I know enough about you to know that you have in 2017 written something about animals. And I should tell you that every penny of whatever I get from the book goes to the hands-on care of creatures. So we are all kindred spirits here, and we love hockey, which is wonderful.
Heck
We
yeah.
do.
You know, I have to say, again, are you sure you're retired? Because the research that you put in, it's like, it's just old news to you, right? Is it hard to break those habits?
Yeah, I guess it is. It's fun, though. It's fun learning about both of you and about your show.
Heck yeah.
And the fact that I get to be on it, because any show that Bruce Boudreau has been on, did he review movies when he was on with you?
Only, just
We talked about movies,
hour.
yeah.
We had to bring up, do you know, Doc, that he fell asleep in a movie theater with Kevin Gorg, a FSN analyst and another Minnesota Wild employee. So we had to chirp him about that a little bit. I know he's like, that was the one exception. I was very tired. And we're like, okay, Bruce.
We had Hockey Day in America was in Minnesota 2 years ago, St. Louis at Minnesota. I'll never forget, a couple of things happened. We had Zach Parise brought his jersey from youth hockey, and Pat Falloon brought his jersey from St. Louis youth hockey. So we showed the kids' jersey, but also we talked to Bruce before the game, and the subject came to Slapshot. And of course, being a part of the movie. But one of the stories that he told that I don't know if he told you or whether it was not in his book, because I read his book cover to cover. He said that one of the days they had the daily rushes where you would go in and you would look at what had been shot that day. And he said, one of my teammates and I went in, and the only other two people there watching were Paul Newman and George Roy Hill, the director. And so he said, we sat in the row behind the two of them as they were watching what all had been shot that day. And Paul leaned back and he saw us there. And he said, I just finished a movie called The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean. I don't know if it's going to be very good, but this movie's going to be great. So that was one other story that Bruce told us that day of the game in St. Paul. And that's one of the other memories I have. Many memories talking about movies, not just hockey, with Bruce Boudreau.
I mean, it's hard to decide whether he loves movies more or hockey, right?
I think he secretly does.
Yeah.
So you remember, I'm getting us off the track here. I hope you don't mind.
We don't need to stay on any track.
There's no track.
We're all over.
Do you remember the Snow White movies with Charlize Theron?
Yes.
Okay. So anyway, it's before a game 7. Anyway, we go through at the morning skate. We go through all the typical hockey questions, and I said, now, Charlize Theron, of course, is the evil one in the Snow White movies, and she has these great torrential, angry tirades that go on. So will you pretend something with me? And he smiled. He said, okay, what? Let's pretend you're a youth hockey coach and she's waiting outside your office because her kid isn't getting any ice time.
Oh boy.
And can you imagine what that would be like? He said, well, the first thing is, I think I'm going to take her into the office and we're going to close the door because I don't know if I want one of those out in the hallway where everybody else can see. But anyway,
that's too
what did
funny.
you want to talk about today?
That's the whole interview.
Right. I love it. Let's just keep going on this.
Oh,
dear. I think what's just so remarkable about you is, like, for instance, just now, all the research and everything that you put into before each broadcast. I mean, how did you start to do that and train yourself to do that? And where do you keep all of that information stored, right? I mean, that's just, there's so much and so many stories. How do you keep that all to memory, commit that to memory, and then tell us a little bit about that process?
It's fun.
Yeah.
That's the fun part. So here's one from Dan Duva, who at the time was the announcer for the Syracuse Crunch, a team that you know very well, Jesse. So I was in Hershey before Christmas visiting. They asked me to come there to make a presentation before a game. And Syracuse is playing Hershey. And it's the last game before Christmas. And the American Hockey League guys, like the NHL guys, don't play Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. And all of these guys had their plane tickets to go home. So they're playing the game, and they're really short. Luke Kwiatkowski, who is a defenseman, is playing forward. They have a whole bunch of guys playing forward who don't belong there because they've got so many injuries up front, and they've got extra defensemen. So guys are playing forward that shouldn't be. Anyway, so I stood behind Dan and listened to him call the game. He's tremendous, so no surprise that he's in the NHL with Vegas. Anyway, so I followed up with him after Christmas, and I said, well, what was the trip home like? He said, we got into the mountain area around Wilkes-Barre, Scranton on the way to Syracuse, and the bus broke down. So now you have all these guys holding plane tickets that assume the next day, Christmas Eve day, they're going to be flying to various parts of the country to get home for Christmas, and the bus breaks down. So he said, fortunately, we're up in a part of the mountain area around Wilkes-Barre, Scranton. I was able to get at least a little wireless, and I got my laptop out, and we got the Frank Sinatra Christmas album on.
Great album.
And he said, so while we're waiting on another bus to come, to get us back home, I put the Frank Sinatra Christmas album on, and he said even the Russians were singing along. But the bus was a long time getting there because it had to come from Syracuse, and there were further delays. And he said one of the Harvard guys got on his cell phone, got his ticket changed to fly out of Scranton, and he had a cab come out and take him to the Scranton airport. So he got out in time at daybreak, and the rest of us got back about the time the sun rose. But
classic Harvard guy thinking a little bit, right? He's using his brains.
That's it. So all of the tickets were still valid by the time they got home, but I'm sure it was a little scary. But of all things, the announcer thinks to have a sing-along to Frank Sinatra.
If that isn't
those are the fun parts of doing the job, though.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
You collect stories like this, and you think of them at odd times, boring the heck out of people watching your show, and you two people are so kind to play along.
Well, I got to ask, because I think it's amazing that, someone who knows as much as you do about hockey, people I think probably assume, well, he must have been studying as soon as he was born, right? And he's just been studying ever since. That's not the case. You grew up in Indiana where basketball was the main sport. And actually it was baseball that you first fell in love with to have dreams of announcing, but you ended up doing hockey. Talk about, what was that like for you to transition? Those are all three very different sports. And as anyone who is in the broadcasting career knows, hockey is a pretty difficult one to get down and know a lot about. So how did you end up at that point? I know you talk about it in your book a little bit, but for our listeners here.
Yes, it was 60 years ago yesterday that I got to see my first game, and I got hooked. A lot of times that happens in an area like Minnesota where you grow up so much around it, it's probably not the case. But in an area like rural Indiana, where at that time we had two rinks in the state. One was the Fairgrounds Coliseum in Indianapolis, which had a pro team, and one was the Coliseum in Fort Wayne, which had a professional team. And fortunately, we had a bunch of guys from Minnesota, Massachusetts, and Michigan who had won the gold medal in 1960 at Squaw Valley, and that was televised. And I had seen that, and there were some games carried also on CBS of the NHL. And so I had a little exposure to hockey, and we had that professional team nearby, and I pestered my parents to take me to a game, and they did. And it's pretty well described in a large part of one chapter in the book, the experience of seeing my first IHL game. And at that time, Fort Wayne was playing against teams in St. Paul and in Minneapolis called the Millers and the Saints. And they wore that orange jersey that you see there with the spaceman, the Comet jersey. And that's what hooked me on hockey. And up until that time, I wanted to be a baseball announcer. And I think that's the way it is with a lot of people when they get hooked on a sport. And the whole notion of collecting stories is just a part of being around human beings. And I think that's far more interesting to people to hear stories than it is to know about scoring streaks or statistics. Those can be forgotten. Now, it doesn't mean they aren't important, but I think the stories stay with people a lot longer. Gee, the two of you have beautiful smiles. Has anybody ever told you? Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll take, especially coming from you. Thank you.
You both have wonderful smiles.
Oh, thank you.
Anyway.
No, I would agree. I think that's my favorite part about this career. I love talking to people and hearing those stories and sharing those stories. Like a 3-2 score is fine. And there's usually, maybe you can pull some sort of storyline out of that, but it's about the people. And especially in hockey, right? Would you say that hockey players truly are special, right? They're different. And there's just something about hockey players and the hockey family that those stories tend to be a little pull at your heartstrings a little bit more. And there's just a humbleness about a player. Would you say that that's kind of true? You've done the kind of the run of athletes here. I mean, have you found hockey to be special in that sense?
Yeah, I spent 47 years around hockey players, and I did not have as much experience around the athletes from other sports. But the background of our sport, if I can call hockey that, is rural Canadian. Right. And the other sports, the background is not that. And so as a result, I think they become, they are much more down to earth because the equipment was wet on the underside of the bus and you got it out. And sometimes it was still wet when you put it on and played the next game. And so even though we've taken players from 20 countries, a part of the 24 teams that participated in August and September in that marvelous tournament, it was not shocking to me that we had 33,000 perfect COVID tests. Because it's a team sport where it's all together, and even though we have people from all those countries, the dressing room still is down to earth, and it's still kind of rural Canadian. Yeah, even though there's Slovaks and Czechs and Finns and Swedes and Russians, it's still pretty much. It's like Dan Duva said. Even the Russians sang along with Frank Sinatra. Where it's all one big family, and even though there are differences, sure, it's different in hockey. It seems to me.
Did Dan say that the Russians were smiling though? Because that's the big question, right? Were they smiling while they were singing? That would be the shocker.
I can't recall. Next time you have him on, you should ask him.
Absolutely.
Well, I got to know something that was really fascinating to me in your book is you talking about your early broadcasting career and being in your teens and kind of going through college and that whole experience of kind of doing all of these things and working for free and throwing opportunities out there, getting rejected on jobs time and time again. And I think a lot of people assume when they see someone with, such a good career as you've had, they just assume that, well, they've always been great. They've always had the good jobs, but it takes a long time to get to that point. What did you learn kind of from those experiences of saying, I will do this for free, just give me the opportunity?
That's it. There is a lot of rejection. And whenever I get a chance to visit, as I did long ago at Dan Duva's class at Fordham, I get to speak at journalism classes, or now do virtual visits to classes like I did at Michigan State last week. If they say, what advice do you have? I said, don't quit, because there's going to be a lot of rejection. You're going to get turned down for jobs. You don't get every job you want, but don't quit. If you believe in yourself and you want to do this in the worst way, don't give up, because others will. And just through persistence and being politely aggressive, not obnoxiously aggressive, because that turns people off, but politely aggressive, you're going to get there. Just keep practicing and doing your work and blooming where you're planted, and go on, and you will get there. Sometimes in those classes, if they're small enough, I'll ask people to talk about the very first major event they ever attended as a fan. And they will, if there's time, stand up and recite what they remember about it. And sometimes they'll talk about going through the stands and what they remember about the field or the ice or whatever it was they saw, and who played and They may not remember the score. They might remember who won. They'll remember who they were with. And invariably, they'll have a big smile on their face as they recount it. And then at the end, I'll say, now multiply that times 47 years and realize the reason I have a smile on my face is I've gotten to do it that long. And you can too. And it's not the perfect job in that some days it won't be pleasant, but most times it will. And most times it's worth going after. And so do it and don't quit. Because it's great.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, we're so fortunate. Again, I mean, Doc, were you ever told at any point in time that, no, you can't do this. You don't have a future in this. It'd be hard to imagine that voice ever being told, no, this isn't a career for you. But I mean, did you have people along the way that had doubted you at all?
Yeah, I think we all do. And a lot of times it was my voice. Because I was younger and I was 18, 19 years of age, I didn't have really a good voice. And one of my, the first person that served as an agent for me, and he did it for 1 year for nothing, if you can imagine that. His name was Art Kaminsky, and he was involved with Herb Brooks and the 1980 Olympic team. And when you see these movies about the 1980 Olympic team, his name is undoubtedly mentioned, and sometimes he is a character played in the movie. Anyway, he agreed to take me on for 1 year for nothing. If he found extra work for me, it was 10%. And he suggested that I get voice lessons. And so I went to a woman. Anybody can get voice lessons from anyone who is a vocalist or has had formal training. I went to a woman named Lillian Wilder in New York. She must have given me a cut rate because she worked with a woman named Oprah. She worked with a president named George H.W. Bush.
Wow.
And she worked with me. So I'm sure I didn't pay that much. So I'm sure that I got a bargain rate. But she struck notes on a keyboard and had me try to match them. But she listened to one of my radio play-by-play tapes in her studio the first day. And it was rat-a-tat-tat machine gun style describing the New York Rangers playing the Los Angeles Kings. And it was on a cassette. It's archaic mode of communication. And she snapped it off and it cracked loudly in her studio. And she said, well, you got it all in, didn't you? And I thought, well, I got a compliment on my first day. And
Open your chest out a little bit.
It wasn't a compliment. She said, the human ear can take all those words in, but the human brain cannot digest them all and process them. You've got to limit your words somehow or other. I know it's radio and you've got to describe, you've got to limit your words. And so even though I probably do a wordy description for television, I was a lot less wordy as the years went on. And the formal training, strangely enough, I started to get network opportunities shortly thereafter. So it must have made a difference.
A little bit. I mean, you managed a decent career, I would say, throughout all of it, right? It turned out
very
okay.
fortunate, yeah. Yeah, I worked for Fox and NBC and ABC and ESPN, did some games for CBS. Couldn't hold a job, ladies.
I'll go sometimes. Well, I think that something that is so cool is you have had the experience of being able to meet so many tremendous athletes, broadcasters, fans, just, anybody over the course of your career. You've come across a lot of really interesting people. When did it start to occur to you that maybe these people were as in awe of you as you were of them? Some of these big name athletes, Wayne Gretzky, Bobby Orr, Sidney Crosby, I'm sure they were probably just as excited. When did that thought start to cross your mind?
I guess it never did. I was always awestruck by them. When I first started covering games for a suburban newspaper in Pittsburgh 50 years ago, Orr was still playing for Boston before he went to Chicago, and Hull was with Chicago before he wound up going to the WHA and then being welcomed back as an ambassador for the Blackhawks. It was a long time ago. So no, I'm still in awe that people recognize me and know that, even in airports, even in hockey crazed Minnesota, that would be the case. It is fun to go to a place, for example, during the Boston Columbus series 2 years ago, on an off day, they know how much I care about animals. And so I went to the Columbus Zoo and got to be around some penguins. These penguins were only about, I would say, 12 to 15 inches tall, and they came running out across this walkway, and following them was the famous Jack Hanna. And Jack had been on television, of course, and still is a number of times, but he basically saved the Columbus Zoo, and he was aware of me, which was quite an honor for me because I was certainly aware of him. And he talked about how the original owner of the Columbus Blue Jackets had actually years before saved the Columbus Zoo, or it wouldn't have been there then. So that's one of those times that I remember and as a very prominent time in my memory bank. And it had nothing to do really with hockey.
Isn't that funny how sometimes that's absolutely the case? Like people assume that we're so involved in hockey that hockey's kind of all that takes up our space and our time, which obviously we have other passions. One of those for you being animals, you know, that's very well described in your book, Off the Mic. And you have a relationship, or you kind of felt a connection with John Tortorella when he made a decision to be there. Tell us a little bit about that story and tell us about your own. You've got horses, you've got dogs. Where did this passion for animals come from for you and your wife, Joyce?
Well, we both had animals when we were kids. My parents raised Boston Terriers, and in addition, we usually had a German Shepherd because we, after we moved out of town, which was 600 people, we moved out to the country. The druggist in our town once told me, "We've got almost 1,000 people here. It's getting kind of noisy." So we moved out of town, and we had a larger piece of property where we could have a bigger baseball field, among other things. And so we got a German Shepherd. And so we usually had German Shepherds and Boston Terriers. And then when my wife and I got married, she was working for the Philadelphia Flyers, and I was too. And we had kind of a hectic life, and it wasn't fair to have a dog at that time because the dog would be left home all day, and that's not fair. Mm-hmm. So as a result, we didn't have animals for quite a while until we were able to locate back in Michigan. After I got a network job, then we didn't really have to live in the East. We could be where we were closer to family. So we got a dog at that point, and then eventually two. And then I didn't realize she had this ambition from the time she was a child to have a horse. And the one horse became two, became six. And,
isn't it funny how that happens?
Yeah, it is. Some of them are rescues. And so that kind of oftentimes goes with the territory when you have a soft heart toward animals. And fortunately, thanks to NBC, we're able to afford to keep them. But we try to help out given this current economic situation, we try to help out in a quiet, anonymous way, people that might be having difficulty paying for necessary surgeries. But that's where the money from the book goes. We can sneak around and do that, and people don't know.
Right. I imagine, have you had those conversations with David Backus as well? He and his wife are also very involved, as I'm sure you're well aware of, in animal rescue.
In 2010, at the Vancouver Olympics, I was able to tell the story about he and Kelly rescuing this pregnant boxer. And this dog had 12 puppies. So now they had the rescue, and they had 13 total dogs, and the Backuses were able to find homes for all of them. Now it's 2014, 4 years later, and all of us are in Sochi. And it becomes very well known that the Backuses have a ground floor location in what you might haphazardly call the Olympic Village as it existed in Sochi. And so there was an awful situation with the dogs of Russia. And before all of us got there, they decided that the dogs were an eyesore. And so in a very sadistic way, they took care of their dog problem with guns. That was just how they did it. Well, some of them fortunately survived, and they were all wandering around for food. Well, the Backuses took two of them in. the Backuses basically kidnapped two of the dogs is what happened. And they went through all kinds of red tape and with the government and got them. And I talked to David about it when we were over there. And he said, you know, they're just like any other dogs. They want attention. They want love. They want food. And we gave them a bath. And now we were getting them shots. And we're trying to work out a way to get them back to the States. Mm-hmm. And so before the game with Canada, I said, look, I'm going to get some time to probably tell this story tomorrow. So what's the message here? Yeah. He said, the message is that it may be fun to adopt a dog that is rescued in Russia by an Olympic athlete, but there are dogs in shelters all over North America that could use your help too. That's the message. So we got it on. And the two dogs came back. They were allowed on the charter. And they were not down in the hold somewhere where it might be cold. They were allowed on the charter, and then they flew back, and the Backuses found homes for them. So they're marvelous people, those two people are, and two of the people that I'm so glad that I am aware of and know.
Well, we were talking, you know, animals, hockey. You mentioned the Olympics, though, which brings up a very interesting story that you've had throughout your career. Your Olympic experience with the women's team early on in your career there, that was a pretty special thing for you to experience as a broadcaster or a hockey fan. Can you tell us about that whole experience?
The 1998 games were very special for me because it was the first time that women were allowed to compete. And it was also a time when the United States had never won in any of the major international competitions against Canada. Canada had always been the dominant force. So in the preliminary round, there was a game that we were doing. I was working with Digit Murphy and Joe Micheletti. And there was a game we were doing, and all of a sudden in the third period, there is this uprising by the United States, and they score 5 times, and we're carrying the broadcast on Turner Sports, and they beat Canada. So now it's a showdown for the gold medal that's going to take place, and it's going to be carried on both CBS and on Turner. CBS has the right to carry it live. We don't have that right because they're the primary carrier. They defer on carrying it live. We offered to carry it live, but they had the right to prevent us from doing that, and they exercised that right. So both of us broadcasted, but both delayed. They had the first delay, we had the second. But at the morning skate that day, tell me if I'm going into too much detail or whether you don't have time for this at all.
No, we love all of it, yes.
Okay, so at the morning skate that day, Ben Smith was the coach of the United States, and we won't go into specifics about Canada, but only a backup goaltender and a couple of the Canadian skaters appeared that day, and so there really wasn't any time to spend with them at all. And then the United States practice was after, and Ben and his coaching staff and all the players were there. And they went through a typical game day skate. And at one point at the center circle, Ben was standing there chatting with his players, and they were all down on one knee, and they had the face mask turned up, and occasionally they would chuckle or react some way or other. And he was, again, calmly talking. And then eventually they tapped their sticks on the ice and went back to shooting pucks or whatever. And then Ben walked over to where John Davidson, who was doing the game for CBS, and I were standing, and some of the other media. And John spoke to Ben first. He spoke up first, and he said, I know some of what you were saying on the ice is privileged, but can you share any of it with us? He said, and this may be so well known now that I'm going over old ground. He said, I told them a golf story. When I was first playing golf, I wasn't really too good. And so when I would be on the green and my opponent would be on the green and he would be away, he would putt first, and I would hope that he'd miss his shot because that would take the pressure off me. But as I got to be a better golfer, I would hope he would make his shot because I was pretty sure I could make mine, and I was a better golfer, so I was okay. And so in essence, I said, this is where you are with Canada now. There's no need for you to feel like you need any breaks to beat Canada, because you're better. You just showed that you can be better. And so that night, they defeated Canada. Sandra White scored into the empty net to make it 3-1. And I was pleased to be having a microphone strapped around my head to document that the United States had defeated Canada for the first set of gold medals. And it was, other than the 1996 World Cup of Hockey, the only time that I was ever able to broadcast the United States winning gold. And other than women's water polo in London when they won gold there. And so it was a lifetime memory for me. And when I got back to the hotel, I had been handed a bag by Bobby Webster, the trainer, that morning. It was a yellow plastic bag that you would get at a supermarket. And when I got back to the hotel, I took it out of my carrying case and opened it up, and I realized what Bobby had given me was a jersey that had been signed
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
by everybody on that team.
That is cool.
And I'm not much of a collector, ladies, but
Yeah, it doesn't look that way.
No, not at all.
No. You see two jerseys behind me. They're just replicas. They're not signed.
Mhm.
I have a signature Bobby Orr of Mario Lemieux and Sidney Crosby on a picture together of one Devils team and of that team. That's all I have.
Wow.
But that meant a lot to me because I had seen something that had never happened before. Not only the first set of gold medals, but also the fact that those ladies were such good representatives of the country, and how eloquent they were, and that they had done such a great job in authoring a victory for the country.
Well, to kind of, I was just going to say, it's incredible that only, that was just over 20 years ago. Like, it feels like a while ago, but in the big scheme of things, it wasn't that long ago that these women were doing something for the first time. Now here we are in 2020, almost 2021, and there's so many more strides that have been taken by women at all levels of hockey. What do you think about that and kind of where we're at today? I know mostly of what you do has been in the NHL realm of things, but as women doing a hockey podcast, we got to ask you what you think about the women's hockey scene.
Oh, yeah. And you think about the fact that there were hardly any college programs at the time. And there was a marvelous, and it's documented briefly in the book, there were some marvelous representatives on that team. But think about that. And in 2018, they won gold again. Mm-hmm. And some of those players were either infants or weren't born at the time that first team won. But there are so many wonderful programs, and you're sitting right in the lap of so many wonderful college programs and high school programs right there in Minnesota, that the whole country now pays attention to women's hockey. But it was very unique at the time that Shelley Looney had the winning goal in that game, and she was diagnosed with a type of dyslexia when she was very young, and was told that by one of her guidance counselors that she would never be able to do college work. And yet, as her coach Ben Smith said, that guidance counselor was talking to the wrong Marine, because she graduated Northeastern and played in their hockey program, and now continues to teach young girls how to play hockey where she is now. I'm just honored to know a person like that, and to know so many people through the years that I was around hockey, regardless of gender.
Mm-hmm. Right. You talk about using morning skate as such a vehicle in order to obtain some of those stories and really get that. And anyone that's been around morning skate, myself included, there's just kind of this fun vibe about a morning skate, right? You get to chat with the players and the coach and just the media in general. So I've got a 2-part question for you here, Doc. First, would you say that's an accurate statement, that it is a great preparation vehicle for you for that night's broadcast and for future broadcasts? And then number 2, Is that a part of it that you miss the most? You had talked about making that connection with people. Is the morning skate probably something that you miss in retirement even more so than a broadcast?
Yeah, you're all over it. Both parts of the question. Yes, there was a time when I was doing Devils games and Versus and NBC that I did 8 games in 10 days. I think I'm 74 now. I was 65 then, and that was one of the last.
I couldn't do it.
That was one of the last years that I did 120 games in a year. But the point I'm making is that I wanted to be at the morning skate, which meant that with each of those games, I needed to be at the airport really early to make a flight that would get me to the next city so that I could be at the 10:30 and 11:30 skates, because those were so important. One of the things I missed this past August and September, because I was doing games from home, but also the other reporters missed who were either in the bubble in Toronto and Edmonton or were not, was that the sessions with players were not held in dressing room areas. They were only available electronically. And the real value that you get as a reporter is having that time at morning skates when there's not the urgency that there is at 6 o'clock for a 7:30 game. The players got to be at various meetings, so you only get a minute or two with them, and they're distracted because they've got other things that's on their mind when they're back for the game. But at the morning skate, they've got lots of time, not as much as they do the day before, but they still have time. They've had their practice. They're going to have a team meal probably. Then they're going to go home, so that you don't have that urgency of time. Here's an example. So it's the Winter Classic in Dallas, and it's January 1st, but this is the day before and the practice at the Cotton Bowl. Now we go up the runway to the football dressing rooms, and you have so many allies in helping you do your job. And one of the equipment guys for the Dallas Stars says, you know, our Radek Faksa, number 12, he'll be playing again next year. Have you heard about his childhood? And I said, no. So they told me they gave me sort of the thumbnail sketch of the story. And I said, is he still here? And they said, yeah, I think he's still in back. Can I talk to him? So they brought him out, and I asked him some specifics about the story. This would probably not take place in North America, but it did. It was a different culture, and it was some time ago. Here's what happened. He's 11 years old. He's playing in this town. He's learning hockey in this town of the Czech Republic, and he's got a great ability, and it is seen at a very young age. Single mom, and he's gone about as far as he can locally, but another team a couple hours away sees him, and they would like him to play for their team. There is not the notion of living with families like we have as part of our culture in the United States and Canada. But the team has a connection with a hotel. So there's a family meeting between Radek and his mother about him going to play for this distant team in the Czech Republic and staying in a hotel by himself, getting himself to school, getting himself to practice, getting himself to games. And he did that for 5 years.
Wow.
Then he comes to North America and plays junior hockey in Ontario province of Canada, and he arrives not knowing English. Then he is drafted by the Stars, plays some American League, and finally makes the big team. And I was hoping to tell that story during the Stanley Cup final, but he was hurt during the final. And I thought, if they win the Stanley Cup when he's out there raising the Stanley Cup, I'll get to at least tell part of the story.
Yeah.
So anyway, when they brought him out to me, I've given you the story. When they brought him out to me, I said, so the door closes behind you at age 11 in the hotel room. What are the first few weeks like? And he said, I was pretty lonesome. I'm thinking, I guess. I said, so how are you and your mom with all of this now? He said, I talk to her almost every day, and I'm not telling you it was easy, but of course it worked out well for us, but it was certainly not an easy time. But what a guy. I mean, what a mom, and what a situation to have risen above that all that time. And it's a story I never got to tell.
Yeah.
But so I've told you.
Now you did. You actually, you're sharing it with our entire view. It's the Beauties exclusive. We got it.
So the next time they come into Minnesota, watch for number 12. He just got a contract extension.
Yes.
Good for him.
It's amazing because, you know, we get all these stories and all these experiences, the morning skates, the game days, the broadcast prep, you know, coming down from the high of those really exciting games that we get to watch night in and night out. How does a guy like Doc Emrick decide it's time to retire? I mean, how long did it take you to come to that decision and say, you know what, this is it for me, after having such an amazing career and being someone that a lot of people really look up to?
Well, I had, it was during the third round of the playoffs this year. So it would have been after Labor Day sometime. It was at a point where the entire crew moved from either Stamford, Connecticut or Toronto out to Edmonton, and some were already there. And I was told I did not have to make that trip if I didn't want to, that they would go through increased fiber optics and enable me to work at home. And I thought to myself, gee, they've protected me throughout this. And as long as I don't have an accident and grab the wrong door handle or something at some public place and get the virus, I should be okay. Mm-hmm. And I will have gone through 40 NHL seasons doing NHL games on television. 50 since I wound up first covering NHL games, and 47 doing play-by-play, and 60 since I first saw a game live. And I still have my health, and my wife still has hers. And older people than myself, and there are some, told me that I would know when it was time. And this seemed like the right time, that I had a lot of great memories, and I still had my health. And it seemed like the right time. And my one regret is I didn't get the Roddick Foxes story. So you can't win them all.
No, absolutely. You know, you're such a humble person, and you've achieved so much. And like I said, we've spent time fangirling over here. You know, we've been so excited to have such a legend.
Thanks.
You know, once you retired, I mean, and unfortunately that's when it happens, right? Retirements, or when someone passes, then the outpouring comes in. I mean, were you kind of overwhelmed with the amount of support and love that kind of came your way upon retirement? What was that situation like for you to navigate?
Well, Sam Flood, who is, you know, the quick story is that in that 50 years ago, when I was covering the Penguins, who were only 3 years old at that time, for a local evening newspaper, Red Kelly was coach of the team, this legend, and he said, when times are tough, you can count on one hand the number of people that are there for you. And he was telling me that after the Penguins were on the losing streak. And he wasn't really talking about hockey. Well, I have my Iron Five, and one of them was Sam Flood, who was my boss at NBC. And he had accepted my phone call about a week before the announcement was made that I was retiring. And he said, you know what we should do is we should do a video, because I had done some of those during the pandemic. He said, we should do a video. And then what I didn't know was that he was introducing the video and having a press conference at the same time, which I thought would be typical. And it would just be media members. I didn't know he was going to be bringing in Gary Bettman and Lou Lamoriello and Eddie Olczyk and a lot of people from my past as surprise guests. So it was probably like the 1950s television show that is now in various museums that none of you would relate to, called This Is Your Life. It was on my entire life sort of going past me like that. And so that was, I am still awestruck by the memory of that day. And then the next day, the book launched, and that had been determined 6 months before. And so I haven't had a lot of time to breathe since then. But it's been fantastic, and I thank you for mentioning it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
well, I think it was crazy because I know that, you know, when you announced your retirement, the first thing that came to my mind was, I can't believe we listened to Doc call his last game and didn't even know. Like, that was kind of the first thought I had was, but it was almost better that way, you know, like you didn't even realize it. You were just enjoying the game how you would have any other time. So I just, it has been a pleasure to get to listen to you these years and reading your book off mic and having you on the podcast as well, because it's you're one of a kind, and we appreciate your time for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was a wonderful invitation, and you let me tell the Charlize Theron story with Bruce Boudreau, and I don't know if Bruce even remembers that, but that was the hypothetical question that I knew I could only pose to him on the day of the 7th game. After
I was going to say, yes. You know what we got to do? We have to get.
Thank you very much for having me. I wish you continued success with the
Thank
show.
you.
And are you still selling the thoroughbred tip sheets? Do you still do that?
I wasn't there this summer because of the pandemic, but
Of
hopefully
course.
I'll get back out there at some point. It would have been my 6th summer there, I think. I've been doing it since I was 20, so it is one of my favorite jobs I've ever had, to be honest. And I hope to get back out there soon. So
good. And you have Jesse, you still have great memories of days in Syracuse. And what all are you doing in addition to this now?
That barn. So I'm the correspondent for the Minnesota Wild for NHL.com. So
wonderful.
Whenever that comes back, hopefully get back there. And then I am the marketing communications manager at an agency working with USA Hockey and Minnesota Hockey, among other things, with their content and their articles. So I get to talk hockey all the time.
Good. The next time you see Bill Garen,
yeah.
Please ask him whether he has sashayed by any defenseman. I used that word to describe one of the moves he made as a New Jersey Devil, and he never let me forget it.
Oh, that's amazing. I could picture that too. Like, that just sounds perfect to me. Before we let you go, I do have one very important question. Since our listeners are very Minnesotan, you actually covered some Minnesota Vikings games in your tenure, right? Were you a fan of the
Vikings fans are trying to forget that. Yes, I did do 2.
What was that like?
It was a lot of fun. The first one was Dennis Green's first game as coach, Mike Holmgren's first game as coach of the Packers, Matt Millen's first game ever after he retired as a 3-time Super Bowl winner, and my first game in 25 years since I graduated college. Rick Gentile was running sports at CBS television. And because Tim Ryan was going to be Matt's regular partner, but he was assigned to the US Open tennis tournament for 2 weeks, they needed somebody to fill in for 2 weekends. And so we all wound up at Lambeau Field. For your first game, it's Lambeau Field. And a player named Fuad Revez kicked a field goal in overtime, and the Vikings defeated the Packers, who were not then led by Brett Favre. The following week was the week that the Packers went to Tampa Bay, and Brett got in the game and threw his first Packer pass, and I got to call that. And the recipient of the first Packer pass was Brett Favre. It ricocheted off one of the on-rushing Tampa Bay linemen and went into Brett's own arms, but it was a completion. The other time was in Los Angeles at the Coliseum against the Raiders, and Jim McMahon was the quarterback and of all things. And I was working with Hank Stram, who never forgot that his Super Bowl victory for Kansas City was at the expense of the Vikings. And
sounds about right.
So we rehearsed our on-camera open, and it was all going to be a certain way. And then we were just about to do the live open, and Hank said, "This is going to Minnesota, right?" I said, "Yes, it is, Hank." He said, and when you introduced me, can you mention my Super Bowl victory over the Vikings? I said, "Oh, no." So, of course, I did, because he was the boss, and I'm sure he wanted to tweak some of the Vikings viewers that way. But anyway.
It's a lifetime of pain as a Vikings fan, as a Minnesota sports fan.
We won't hold it against you guys. Don't worry.
Not at all. Well, Doc, thank you again so much for taking the time. We would love to have you back on. Maybe sneak Bruce in, and the two of you, we'll just sit back and let you guys talk. And
sometime around playoff time would be fun, but I have a feeling he might be working by then.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, exactly. Well, Doc, thank you again. Best to you and Joyce. Happy holidays. We'll catch you soon.
You too.
We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, this is producer Fred. I just wanted to make sure everyone is out there subscribing, liking, sharing, rating, anything you can to help grow the Beauts would be amazing. I want you to tell your hockey coach. I want you to tell your grandma. I want to tell your friends, everybody. And by the way, check out our merch. Buy our merch. Bye.
We're back. Another huge, incredibly large, ginormous shout out to Doc Emrick for joining us. Like, my face, I've said this before, but it hurts from smiling so much. Like, that was such an incredible experience for us because I meant it. I was fangirling a little bit.
Yeah.
Fred, I know you were fangirling.
Fred was for sure.
Fred was nervous.
Oh, yeah, of course I was.
He doesn't want you to know, but he was.
Oh, I was.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's sometimes like you just don't want to like interject, but I felt like I wanted to at least say thank you on behalf of a friend of mine, because my friend's trying to be a broadcaster for baseball in St. Louis, and he like went to broadcast school and everything, and he sent Doc tapes, and Doc actually sent a thorough critique back.
Wow.
So like that's kind of the character that he has, because it's always like, what can you do for people who can't do anything for you?
Yeah.
Like, how do you treat those people? And Doc has always been like the best to those people. You just hear the stories about him all the time.
Right. Well, and I mean, you even felt it like in that entire interview. It's, I'll say I put Doc on a pedestal. He deserves that. He's had this illustrious career that we all aspire to in media. And for him to make it feel like I'm on that same page as him and I deserve to be there. It's a really takes a special person. And I know we've crossed paths with so many amazingly great people, but I think he is honestly one of the best. He just made us feel really good about ourselves. And he was honored to be a part of our show, and really we're the ones who are honored.
I know when I was in college, one of the things that I learned in one of my reporting classes that I literally to this day I've never forgotten was my teacher said, you are a human before you're a reporter. And I've never forgotten that, because it's just, basically about being on the same level as another person. You're not there to report something. You're there to get to know that person. I think Doc is kind of just the epitome of that. He's there for the stories. He wants to get to know these people. And then that translates into stories he can share, on a broadcast or among the hockey community. And I just think that's kind of what makes him such a special person. And there's a big reason why everybody looks up to him. I mean, when he retired, that was really big news. And so it was a pleasure to have him on the podcast. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the interview as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you, because it was definitely a highlight of our podcast career.
I mean, he did his research on us. For those of you who don't know, because I've never talked about this in my career, I had covered a few games for the Syracuse Crunch when I was out in Syracuse, New York, covering Division I lacrosse mostly. Yeah. But obviously I found hockey and I found a way to cover that too. So that's something I don't talk about because it was so brief and it was kind of just a very small like blip in my entire career. But for him to have found that out was kind of just like, I was so taken aback. I'm like, I don't even really remember that. Like that was so long ago. I remember John Cooper actually was the coach, ironically. He was now the Tampa Bay Lightning. I remember little bits and pieces of it, but it was so brief. The Great Barn, it was a really cool experience. But for him to have found that out, or about your track record rather.
I was literally thinking off air, we were talking about this for a second, because I'm like, gosh, like I have, you can Google our names, right? And like stuff will come up from our careers, but like, I know if I Google my name, it's going to be like Whitecaps, this podcast. Like, I don't know if anything comes up about the track. Either way, he did his research, and you got to give him that. And would you have expected anything less from Doc Emrick? I mean, he just came in ready to go, and that's who Doc is. We love it.
You got to read his book, though. I mean, we read his preview for his interview, and it is such a great book.
Yes.
Off mic.
Off mic. So be sure to check that out. There's so much detail about some of these incredible stories. Like we said, we could have had him on for 2 hours just talking about all of it.
When I was reading through the book, I'm like taking mental notes of like, oh, I got to ask this question. And all of a sudden I had like 30 questions in my head. I'm like, I'm going to be able to ask maybe 4 of these. Like I have to find a way to narrow this down, because it's just, he writes stories like he verbally says them. I mean, it's literally, you hear his voice in your head when you're reading through, and the foreword by Eddie Olczyk is fantastic as well. I mean, it's a great book, and go get one, give it to somebody for Christmas. I think it would make a fantastic gift as someone who's a hockey fan or an aspiring broadcaster. It's definitely a read that everyone should have.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, shout out to Doc. You're the best. We appreciate you. Segment 3 is going to look a little bit different moving forward.
Yeah.
Young Alexis got all of her anger out. She's now kind of like mediocre angry Alexis on Twitter. Yeah. We don't need you to rehash the angry Alexis Twitter. You can go find that yourself. So we are going to move our up for the debate poll, which we put out on social media each week, to segment 3. So that'll be our new segment 3 instead of Dear Diary. Obviously, if Alexis has a good rant, which
I might be able to dig up a few, but yeah.
But up for debate usually causes a an Alexis rant in itself. So I think it works out perfectly. Reminder, questions, cues with the Beauties, YouTube exclusive. So this week's Cues with the Beauties will be available as well. So be sure to check out our YouTube channel for that exclusivity. Subscribe so you don't miss a beat. But some good questions this week. So let's get into the up for debate topic, shall we?
I'm excited about this one. This is good.
Again, it was another one that I knew I was going to be able to stir that Minnesota Wild pot.
Oh yeah.
I went with coaches, and I excluded Dean Ebbson for a reason, because I wanted past coaches that are not currently with the Minnesota Wild. The coaches I named: Mike Yeo, Bruce Boudreau, and Mr. Jacques Lemaire. I knew it was going to be tough because I struggled with it.
It is tough, yeah.
And I think I kind of saw the division exactly where I pictured it between Jacques and Bruce.
Yeah.
They're two very different coaches, but likable and lovable in their own way. So Alexis,
very different coaches, but yes.
And you know what? I'll toss a coin into Mike Yeo's bank. I liked him. I thought he, I don't dislike. His family still resides here in Minnesota. His kid went to Hill Murray. I mean, I don't mind Yosi. He's all right. But I know you have feelings, Alexis. Why don't you kick it off? Who was your selection in this week's poll?
Well, it is a tough question, and coaches, I think, can be pretty tough to judge in general. Obviously, the Wild have never won a Stanley Cup, so you can't really put that kind of pedigree into consideration because all of the coaches are kind of on the same footing in that aspect. It's tough because Jacques Lemaire has coached the most amount of games for the Minnesota Wild, almost double what Bruce Boudreau coached, who was the second most games for the Minnesota Wild. It was Mike Yeo. So almost double that. And statistically speaking, it was Jacques Lemaire who had Mike Yeo who had the most wins in the playoffs, which is hard for me to even say because I didn't really like Mike Yeo as the head coach for the Minnesota Wild. Didn't like the way he coached, and I just didn't feel like it was a good fit. But it is tough to look at. If you look at just win percentage for the regular season, Bruce Boudreau is the one who has the highest win percentage. So keep in mind, when Jacques Lemaire coached, he is a defensive-minded coach. So the Wild were very defensive-minded. I would also argue, though, that Jacques Lemaire has had the chance to coach the only true superstar the Minnesota Wild ever saw, which was Marian Gaborik. So I think that's something to take into consideration too, that the rest of these coaches, I think you could argue Kevin Fiala was a budding superstar with Bruce Boudreau. Obviously now Evason has taken over, and I think Fiala's still coming into his skin. So we'll see what happens there. But I would say that the best coach the Minnesota Wild had, I'm going to have to go with Jacques Lemaire. He was also the only coach to win the Jack Adams Award. He won that in 2002, 2003, which was when the Wild had that long Stanley Cup playoff run where they made it to the conference finals. And I just think he had the most time with the team, and I think he was a well-respected guy. Bruce is a very close second for me, though, just because I love Bruce's personality. He was so much fun to be around. Just had the best quotes, and wasn't even just feeding you BS. Like he just spoke what he spoke, and they were always great quotes, funny or otherwise. And I think he did a lot of good with the team, and the team went through some tough phases with Bruce as their coach, not because of Bruce, but he had a lot to deal with when he was with the team, and I thought he handled a lot of it really well. And I thought his firing was a little premature, in my opinion. So I would say Jacques was the best they saw. Bruce was a very close second.
I have nothing to add. No, I'm just kidding. That's it. You said it. No, I select Mike Yeo, and that's my. No, I'm just kidding, guys.
I was literally ready to quit.
I kid. I don't think he was as terrible. I don't hate him as much as maybe the state of hockey does. A coach that I thought was less
he went on
impressive.
And coached in St. Louis, and that he did so well there that everyone was so mad. Yeah.
I mean, I would put him above Todd Richards and Torch, maybe. Like
they tweeted, they were like, put some respect on Todd Richards' name.
Yeah,
I'm like, well,
why?
where is it? We'll put it there if it's there. It's not there. So go find it for me.
He got a Stanley Cup as an assissistant. He's not the head coach in town. Again, no disrespect to a Minnesota native and Todd Richards.
But we're also talking about their time with the Wild. Like, I don't, it doesn't matter what they did outside of that. So
yeah. But I too went with Jacques. It's hard to go against such a legend in every aspect of coaching too. I mean, even with outside of the Minnesota Wild, you can't say Jacques Lemaire is not a successful coach. Look what he did with the New Jersey Devils and all of that. And he was, I mean, I know I obviously wasn't working in this career at the time that Jacques was coaching the team. But I heard he was just as great of an after quote as Bruce can be.
Yeah,
Maybe
that's
not
true.
as colorful, but certainly he still evoked a lot of humor out of himself in a very different manner than Bruce might.
Yeah.
So I think there's that to be considered too in my decision. I like a guy that you can get along with. That's where it made it tough for me, because I had built kind of a relationship with Bruce. We got to see him for the time that he was here, and he started when I started, and I respect what he tried to do, and I think he tried so freaking hard with this Minnesota Wild team that just didn't respond to him necessarily. But players respond to Jacques because there's something that comes with the respect that a player has. And I think Jacques just commanded that from everybody. And not to say Bruce didn't try, I just think sometimes it was a little bit more difficult for him. So Jacques' my guy. I think most of you agreed. So appreciate everybody. Again, we'll have these every week, so be sure to take part in it. If you have any ideas for and up for the debate topic, we would love to hear that. So
what do you want to argue about? We'll give it to you.
Yeah, exactly. I know, that was a very tame Alexis rant, I felt. There was,
if I had selected
Mike Yo, would you have gone very hard?
I would have gone off the rails. Well, you come in here and you're like, let's throw Martin Hansel in one of these things, and let's throw Martin Skula in, and I'm like, if Jesse likes Mike Yo, I can't do it anymore.
I stand by my decisions. Well, again, that'll do it for this week's episode. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Thanks to Soda Stick for the sponsorship. Thanks to Talk North for featuring us on their network. We love all of you. We love all of our listeners, everybody who tunes in every week that keeps this thing going. Truly, for Doc Emerick to not only have realized during his research but to acknowledge what we've been doing. We're coming up on a 1-year anniversary here of this podcast.
I can't believe it.
It's weird that we're only a year in. I feel like I've aged 100 years doing this sometimes, right?
Well, 2020 has just been one heck of a ride.
One heck of a decade. Yeah. So no, thank you. We do appreciate that. Again, we'll keep this content churning. So that'll do it. Tune in next week. Until then, have a good one. Near.